Today we are going to read a folk tale called The Elves and the Shoemaker by Paul Galdone. He also wrote and illustrated The Gingerbread Boy. Authors and illustrators may make books that are the same in many ways. How are these two covers alike? On this cover, what do you notice about the elves? Let's read to find out what happens to the elves. The Elves and the Shoemaker by Paul Galdone. There once was a shoemaker who, through no fault of his own, became so poor that at last he had nothing left but just enough leather to make one pair of shoes. He cut out the shoes at night so he could set to work on them the next morning. Oh, what are you thinking about this shoemaker? Because he had a good conscience, the shoemaker laid himself down on his bed and fell asleep at once. In the morning, after he had said his prayers, the shoemaker went to his workshop. There he found a pair of shoes made and finished and standing on his table. He was very much astonished and could not tell what to think. He took the shoes in his hand to examine them more carefully. They were so well made that every stitch was in the right place, just as if they had come from the hand of a master workman. It says that the shoemaker is astonished. What does that mean? Soon a customer entered, and as the shoes fitted him very well, he paid more than the usual price for them. Now the shoemaker had enough money to buy leather for 2 more pairs of shoes. He cut them out at night and intended to set to work the next morning with fresh spirit. But that was not to be, for when he got up, they were already finished. A customer soon bought them and gave the shoemaker so much money that he was able to buy enough leather for 4 more pairs. Do you think that the shoemaker's problem is being solved? How so? Early the next morning he found the 4 pairs finished also. And so it always happened. Whatever the shoemaker cut out in the evening was finished by the morning, and soon he was making a very good living. One night, not long before Christmas, when the shoemaker had finished cutting out the shoes from the leather, he turned to his wife before he went to bed and said, "How would it be if we were to stay up tonight and see who it is that does us this service?" His wife agreed and set a candle to burn. Then they both hid in a corner of the room behind some coats that were hanging up. They peeked out between the coats and began to watch. How are the shoemaker and his wife going to find out who was making the shoes? Whom do you think they will find? As soon as it was midnight, in came 2 neatly formed, naked little elves. They seated themselves on the shoemaker's table, took up the work that was already prepared, and began to stitch, pierce, and hammer the leather. The elves worked so cleverly and quickly with their little fingers that the shoemaker's eyes could scarcely follow them. So full of wonder he was. The elves seemed to be very kind. Why do you think they were helping? The elves never stopped until all the shoes were finished and were standing ready on the table. Then they jumped up and ran off. The next morning the shoemaker's wife said to her husband, "Those elves have made us rich, and we ought to show them how grateful we are. With all their running about and nothing to cover them, they must be very cold." She smiled. "I'll tell you what. I will make little shirts, coats, waistcoats, and breeches for them, and knit each one of them a pair of stockings. And you shall make each of them a pair of shoes." Why do you think the shoemaker and his wife want to make clothes for the elves? The husband consented willingly, and that night, when everything was finished, they laid the gifts on the table instead of the cut-out leather. Then they hid themselves so they could observe how the elves behaved when they saw their presents. At the stroke of midnight, the elves rushed in, ready to set to work. But when they found the neat little clothes made just for them, they stood a moment in surprise, and then they showed the greatest delight. Quickly they took up the pretty garments and slipped them on, singing, "What spruce and dandy boys we are we! No longer cobblers we will be." They hopped and danced about, jumping over the chairs and tables, and at last they danced out the door. Don't they look dandy? From that time on, the elves were never seen again, but the shoemaker and his wife prospered as long as they lived. Did you like that ending? What do you think will happen to the shoemaker? I don't have any thing written for you to do after listening to the story, but I would like you to think about something nice that you can do for someone and do that today. Have a great day. See you tomorrow.